numbers. Okay, same thing. Anyway, what is a significant number? A significant number are numbers from 1 through 9. That means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. They are all significant numbers. They are all sig figs, okay? So there's no doubt. Sig figs are 1 through 9. Now, sometimes 0 can be a sig fig, but there are rules, and we're going to discuss them. Okay, so you see the sig fig number 1, the top, okay, the top level. See the 1 right there? All right, so those zeros coming after the 1, I like to call after zeros. Okay, so after zeros from a sig fig are not sig figs themselves. So every 0 you see, I don't care if it's 2, 1, 1 million. If it's after a 1, as you're seeing, or after any sig fig, they are not included as sig figs. Okay? Look at the bottom. All the zeros here, they are before the 1. So I call these before zeros. So we have after zeros and before zeros. Okay, so before zeros are also not sig figs. Okay, they are not included in the sig fig family. So is that clear? However, this rule can change if a decimal is added. Okay, so if I put a decimal here, then the rule changes as to which zeros are sig figs and which are not. Okay, so zeros, after zeros that are before a decimal are included as sig figs. So all of these zeros are sig figs. Okay, and any 0 afterwards. These are all sig figs because we have a decimal. However, these zeros are not after this decimal. They are before. Okay, don't forget these are the before zeros and these are the after zeros. These before zeros are before the decimal, so they are not sig figs at all. Okay, now if I put zeros after the decimal, then these after zeros, they are now sig figs. So if you ask me how many sig figs are in the, let's go here, in the top row here, how many sig figs? Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Bottom, how many sig figs are here? Well, all of these zeros do not count. Again, all numbers from 1 through 9 are sig figs, so this is definitely a sig fig. These zeros follow after the 1, so now we have 1, 2, oh, no. We have 1, 2, 3 sig figs. At the top, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sig figs. Okay, just that easy. Now, let's deal with something else. How about the zeros that are in between numbers? They are also included as sig figs. They do not need a decimal because they are in between numbers, so they are included in the sig fig family. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sig figs. All right, so I think that's clear. Now, zeros, they are very confusing when it comes to sig figs. Here is a rule. All zeros, whether there is a decimal or not, if they come before a sig fig, do not count them. Okay, when you're counting sig figs. So there's a decimal. Okay, so you would believe that these zeros count. No, they don't. Because there's not a sig fig in front of them. So you can don't count these decimals. So we only have 3 sig figs here. That's it, 3. Now, if there was a sig fig, let's say here, then you'll count that 0. If there's a sig fig there, then you'll count those 2 zeros. If there's a sig fig there, you'll count those 3 zeros. And if there's a sig fig there, you'll count those 4 zeros. And of course, the sig fig there. You count all the zeros. Okay, so don't be confused there. Here, we have zeros before a sig fig. Don't count any of them. Okay, don't count any of them. So you only count the one that's in between or after a sig fig when there's a decimal present. So here, we have 4. We don't count those zeros because they precede our sig figs. So again, we have 4. And we have zeros in between sig figs and after, but they are both after a decimal and after a sig fig. Include them all. Got it? Okay, so real quickly, real briefly, let's look at this. So we have 500. How many sig figs are here? You only have 1, okay? Because you have a 5 and you have zeros without a decimal. So these are called after zeros, after a sig fig. They are not counted at all. So you have 1 sig fig there. What about here? Okay, we have a bunch of zeros and a sig. So 5 is already a sig fig. 1 through 9 are automatically sig figs. But we have zeros, and they are before and after a decimal. So you count them all. How many sig figs we have here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5 sig figs. How many sig figs here? We only have how many? We have 1. Okay. So the zeros, there are no decimals. So if there are zeros without a decimal, none of them are sig figs unless they are in between sig figs themselves. Numbers like 1 through 9. Okay, so example. So this right here, it's not a sig fig because these zeros are not in between sig figs. So this would be 1 as well. But I want to give you an example of what I mean. If I threw a number 1 here or number 9 here or even number 7 here, these zeros would be in between the sig figs, so they would be included as sig figs. So this would be 4 sig figs. Okay. If I take the 7 off, you only have 1. The zeros are not in between sig figs, so they wouldn't be counted. So we will have 1. Here we have a 0 in between sig figs, so we have 3 altogether. 3. Here, 4 numbers, 1 0 is in between sig figs. The last 0 is not, and there is no decimal, so we do not count it. We have 3 sig figs. We have a decimal, but we have a 0 before the decimal, so we don't count any 0 before a decimal as a sig fig. But every 0 after a sig fig and every 0 in between a sig fig, we will count as a sig fig. So right now we have zeros after a decimal, so we count them. Doesn't matter if there's a sig fig there or not, 1 through 9. The simple fact that they are after this decimal, they're automatically included as sig figs. So we have 3 here, 3 sig figs. Here, this looks tricky, doesn't it? No, we have a decimal and we have zeros after the decimal. So we have 4. Here, we have a 0 before the decimal. Do not count that. We have a 0 after the decimal, and we have a 0 in between sig figs. So we count both zeros. We have 4 again. 4 sig figs. Here, we have zeros in between sig figs, so they're automatically included as a sig fig, decimal or not. So we have 2, the number 2, 2 zeros, and the number 1. We have 4 sig figs again. Now we don't have a decimal, so any number, any 0 that's not in between sig figs. This 0 is actually in between 2 sig figs, so we count that. This 0 is not, so we don't count that because there's no decimal. So we have 3 sig figs here. We have a decimal this time. Okay, same number. So we count the 0 that's still in between the sig figs, so that's counted as a sig fig. We have 3, and this time we include the 0 because we see a decimal, so we have 4 sig figs here. Okay, so we have a 0 before the decimal, do not count it. We have a 0 in between sig figs, count it. We have 3 sig figs here. We have 2 zeros after a decimal, so they're both sig figs. 1 is in between sig figs, so you know we include that one. And we have 1, the other 0 is after the decimal, so it's automatically counted as a sig fig. We have 4 as well here. We have a decimal, so that 0 is before a decimal. Okay, so this could be a little tricky. This 0 is before a decimal. It's not after the decimal as I was teaching, but it's after a sig fig. So any 0 that's after a sig fig and followed by a decimal, you include that as a sig fig. So this 0, although it's not on the right side of the decimal, because it's after a sig fig and not before it, we need to include it as a sig fig. So we have 2 here. Okay, so if this problem looked like this, let's see if I did this. Okay, now this 0 is not after a sig fig, it's before one, so we don't count it. Okay, we only count the 0 that's after a sig fig that's before a decimal. Yes, it sounds tricky. So just get used to it. Play the video back. This would be, again, just 2. Again, we have a 0 before a sig fig. You never count a 0 before a sig fig. Okay? There needs to be a sig fig before 0. That's before a sig fig, so we don't count it. We have 10 here. Now, if this decimal was not here, we will only have 1 sig fig. But because we have a decimal, we need to count the 0 that's after the sig fig. So we have 2. We have a decimal and 2 zeros. We count everything. 3. We have, here you go, that tricky one again. We have a 2, so we definitely count that. And we have 2 zeros after the sig fig, but there's a decimal, so you count every 0. Okay, so that's 3. You count every 0 that's after the sig fig and after a decimal. So let's say if we had a problem like this. 1, 2, 3. Okay? So we have zeros after a sig fig, and there is a decimal, so we count those zeros. So here are the zeros that's after the sig fig. We count those, but we also count every 0 after the decimal. So we have 6 sig figs here. 200, is there a decimal? No. So we don't count those zeros after a sig fig. We only count the sig fig itself. So we have, which is number 2. So we have 1 sig fig. Here we have a sig fig and we have a 0 after it, but there is a decimal. So we count the 0 that's after the sig fig, and we have a 0 after the decimal. So we definitely count that. So we have 3 sig figs. 2 zeros after a sig fig, no decimal, don't count them. 1 sig fig. 2 zeros after a sig fig with a decimal, count on everything. 3 sig figs. Okay, 3 zeros after a sig fig, no decimal, don't count them. 1 sig fig. And we have 3 zeros after a sig fig, but we have a decimal, so count every 0. Okay, so we have 4 sig figs here.